I had always thought moving into a quiet suburban neighborhood would mean peace. After years of working late nights in the city, dealing with honking horns, sirens, and the chaos of downtown living, I was ready for something calmer. My new house sat on the edge of the development, with a good-sized backyard and a strong wooden fence I had built myself just months earlier. That fence wasn't just any fence, it was my pride. I had spent an entire summer weekend sanding, staining, and setting each post so it stood perfectly straight. It gave me privacy, marked my boundary, and, frankly, kept my sanity intact. But no neighborhood is perfect. In my case, perfection was shattered by one woman, Karen. Karen was the self-appointed queen of our HOA. She wasn't the president, mind you, or even an elected member of the board. But if you asked her, she was the moral compass of the subdivision, the unofficial enforcer of community standards. She lived 3 houses down from mine, and I swear she had binoculars permanently glued to her face, watching every neighbor's move. Trash cans out 5 minutes too early. Expect a passive-aggressive note. Lawn not mowed to golf course length. She'd file a formal complaint with the HOA. Her son, Derek, was her pride and joy, or at least, that's what she told everyone. In reality, Derek was a 20-something burnout who still lived in her basement, drove recklessly around the neighborhood, and thought the rules didn't apply to him. He had a beat-up silver sports car that sounded like it was on its last legs. He revved it constantly, blasting down our quiet residential streets, as though he were in some illegal street race. I had warned him once, politely, when he tore past my house while my niece was visiting. She was playing in the driveway, and he missed her by less than a yard. I walked over and said, "Hey, Derek, slow down. We've got kids here. This isn't a racetrack." He sneered and smirked. "Relax, man. I've been driving longer than you think. I know what I'm doing." Of course, Karen got wind of that conversation. Later that evening, she stormed up to my porch with her arms crossed, so tightly it looked like she was holding herself back from lunging. "How dare you lecture my son," she barked. "He is a responsible young man. If you don't like the way he drives, maybe you should consider living somewhere else." That was the first time I realized, to Karen, her son could do no wrong. For months, I ignored them both as best I could. I figured if I kept to myself, they'd eventually get bored and find someone else to target. My fence was my barrier not just from the street, but from drama like hers. But that's the thing about fences, they can't stop cars. It was a Saturday afternoon when everything came crashing, literally, down. The sky was a perfect blue, the kind of day that made you want to grill burgers and sit outside with an iced tea. I was in the yard trimming some shrubs, humming to myself, when I heard it, the distinct, angry roar of Derek's muffler as he sped around the corner. The sound was louder than usual, like the engine was screaming in pain. Then came the screech of tires, a sharp squeal that made every hair on my neck stand on end. My first thought was, he's lost control. And I was right. In a split second, I watched as Derek's car fishtailed, swerved across the street, and plowed directly into my fence. Wood cracked like thunder. Boards flew through the air, snapping and splintering. My once sturdy fence was now a mangled wreck, with Derek's car nose-deep into the rubble. The silence afterward was almost worse than the crash. Birds stopped chirping. My neighbors froze on their porches. My heart pounded as I dropped the clippers and sprinted toward the wreck. Derek stumbled out of the car, looking more annoyed than hurt, brushing wood chips off his jacket. He cursed under his breath, glaring at the smashed front bumper like the accident was somehow the car's fault. "Are you kidding me?" I shouted, hands on my head as I surveyed the destruction. "You just destroyed my fence." Derek scoffed. "Chill, man. It's just a fence. You can fix it. Just a fence. My blood boiled. That fence had taken me weeks of work and hundreds of dollars. And here stood this kid, acting like it was nothing more than a paper bag he'd bumped into. Before I could reply, I heard the shrill sound of Karen's voice carrying down the street. Derek. Oh, my poor baby. What happened? She came running, her phone already in hand, glaring daggers at me as though I had pushed her son into the wreck myself. What did you do to him? She snapped. Why is your fence even that close to the road? This is your fault. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My fault. My fence was exactly where it should be, well within property lines, nowhere near the curb. Yet here she was, twisting reality to shield her son. I pointed to the skid marks across the asphalt, clear as day. He lost control, Karen. He was speeding again. Look at the road, he's lucky he didn't hit someone walking their dog. Karen folded her arms, her tone sharp as knives. No. What really happened is your fence is an eyesore and sticks out. It was only a matter of time before it caused an accident. If anything, you owe my son for the damage to his car. My jaw dropped. This couldn't be real. She was actually blaming me for her son plowing into my yard. And worse, Derek stood there nodding, smug as ever, like her delusion was his shield. Then came the words that made my stomach drop. You know what, Karen hissed, I'm calling the police. They'll see that this is your responsibility. You're going to pay for this. I stared at her, stunned, as she dialed. My neighbors whispered to each other, watching the drama unfold like it was a TV show. But deep down, I already knew something Karen didn't. The evidence was against them, not me. And soon, the cops would make that crystal clear. The wail of sirens echoed down the street not 10 minutes after Karen's frantic call. By then, a crowd of neighbors had gathered. Some leaned against their mailboxes, others whispered behind cupped hands. A few even had their phones out, recording, because in our neighborhood, Karen drama was practically a spectator sport. Derek stood slouched against his car, trying to look bored, while Karen paced like a drill sergeant preparing her troops. When the black and white cruiser finally pulled up, she shot me the most satisfied smirk I'd ever seen, as though the cavalry had come to rescue her. 2 officers stepped out. One was a tall, broad-shouldered man with mirrored sunglasses, the other a younger woman with a notebook already in hand. They approached cautiously, scanning the scene, the busted fence, the skid marks, Derek's crumpled hood. Before they could even introduce themselves, Karen launched into a monologue. Officers. Thank goodness you're here. My poor son was the victim of this man's negligence. Look at this. She gestured dramatically toward the splintered fence. He built that fence dangerously close to the street. It's a hazard. My son barely escaped with his life. The younger officer blinked, pen hovering. Just to be clear, you're saying the fence caused the accident? Yes. Karen cried. It juts out, it's ugly, and it's not even compliant with community standards. I've told the HOA a dozen times. He refuses to fix it. And now look what happened. I couldn't hold back anymore. Are you serious right now? Officers, the fence is perfectly within property lines. You can check the plat map if you want. Her son was speeding. Look at the skid marks. He lost control and smashed into my yard. Derek straightened, running a hand through his hair like he was in some teen drama show. Don't listen to him, he muttered. I was driving carefully. The fence came out of nowhere when I turned the corner. It's basically a trap. A trap? I repeated, incredulous. It's a fence, not a spike strip. You were going way too fast. The older officer raised his hand for silence. His tone was calm but firm, the kind of voice that made you instinctively shut up. All right. Let's slow down. We're going to gather facts first. No more yelling. He looked at Derek. License and registration, please. Derek hesitated, fumbling with his wallet like it was the hardest task in the world. Karen immediately jumped in. Officer, isn't it obvious? He's the victim here. My son's car is totaled, and this man's dangerous fence is to blame. Shouldn't we be focusing on his liability? The officer ignored her, taking Derek's documents and inspecting the car. The front bumper was hanging by a thread, the headlights shattered. He crouched to check the tires and the road surface, eyes narrowing. Meanwhile, the younger officer walked along the skid marks, tracing them with her pen. They stretched almost 20 yards before ending at the wreck. She looked back at me. Sir, you said he was speeding. How fast do you think he was going? At least 40. This is a 25 zone, and it's a blind corner. I heard the engine before I saw him. Karen scoffed. Oh please. My son is a careful driver. He has years of experience. I couldn't help but laugh. Years of experience. He's wrecked into a stationary fence in broad daylight. That earned me a glare sharp enough to cut steel. The older officer rejoined us, holding Derek's registration. Mr. Miller, he said to Derek, your inspection sticker is expired. Did you know that? Derek shifted uncomfortably. Yeah, I was gonna get that fixed. Just waiting on some parts. Karen waved dismissively. Technicalities. That's irrelevant to what happened here. The real issue is this man's fence. We'll be pressing charges if necessary. The officer adjusted his sunglasses and turned to me. Sir, can you provide proof that your fence is on your property? Yes, I said instantly. I have the survey documents inside. Built it myself last summer, after confirming with the city zoning office. Everything is compliant. Karen's face twisted like she'd bitten a lemon. She hadn't expected me to have receipts, literally. As I hurried inside to grab the paperwork, I heard her whispering furiously to Derek. Stick to the story. Don't admit anything. He'll end up paying for the damages if we play this right. I clenched my fists. It was one thing for Derek to be reckless, but for Karen to outright conspire in front of the police. That was another level of audacity. When I came back with the folder, the younger officer took her time examining the plat map and permits I'd kept neatly filed. She even measured from the curb to the fence posts. Finally, she nodded. Looks like you're well within your rights, sir. The fence is properly placed. I exhaled in relief, but Karen wasn't done. Of course you would take his side, she spat. This is a setup. Everyone in this neighborhood knows he's difficult. He's been harassing us for months. My jaw dropped. Harassing you? The only thing I've done is ask your son not to nearly run over children. The older officer raised his hand again. Enough. We're not here to referee neighbor disputes. We're here to figure out what caused this crash. So far, we have evidence of speeding, expired inspection, and a vehicle in poor condition. Karen opened her mouth, ready for another outburst, but the younger officer cut her off politely. Unless you can provide photographic evidence, or a witness statement that this fence caused the crash, we have to go by what's in front of us. And right now, it looks like your son was at fault. Karen gasped as though someone had slapped her. Derek's face darkened. He muttered something under his breath about biased cops, and kicked a splinter of wood with his shoe. But the officers weren't finished. The older one walked around to the driver's side of Derek's car, leaned in and whistled. "Son, are you aware your airbags didn't deploy? This car shouldn't even be on the road." Karen rushed to his side. "Don't you dare talk to him like that. You should be thanking him. If he hadn't swerved, he could have hit a pedestrian. He's a hero, not a criminal." I almost choked. A hero? He just destroyed my fence. What kind of mental gymnastics do you live by? The crowd of neighbors chuckled softly. A few even nodded in agreement with me. One elderly man called out, "Tell it like it is." Karen spun around and shot him a glare too, but the damage was done. The public wasn't buying her story. Still, she doubled down. That was Karen's trademark. Never admit fault, always push harder. "Officers," she said icily, "I demand that you write him up for negligence. My son will be filing an insurance claim against him." The younger officer flipped her notebook closed with a snap. That's not how this works. You can file whatever claim you want, but the evidence here speaks for itself." That's when I saw it, the tiny twitch in Karen's jaw, the first crack in her mask of confidence. She was losing control of the narrative, and she hated it. But if she thought the humiliation stopped there, she had another thing coming. Because the police were just getting started. The younger officer tucked my property survey back into her folder, and the older one adjusted his sunglasses again, turning to Derek. His voice dropped into that serious, no-nonsense tone you only hear from cops who've seen this scene 100 times before. "Son, tell me exactly what happened, your version. From the moment you turned that corner." Derek shuffled his feet, his bravado fading under the weight of the officer's stare. He looked around nervously, then muttered. "I was driving home. Not fast or anything. Just normal speed. Then this fence just came out of nowhere. Like, it was way too close. I swerved to avoid clipping it, but the car slid out. I couldn't stop myself. Normal speed. You left skid marks half a block long." The older officer didn't look at me, but his jaw tightened, like he'd made note of my words. He pressed Derek again. "So you weren't speeding?" "Not at all." "No," Derek said quickly, shaking his head. "Just, 20, maybe 25. Karen jumped in, her voice sharp. "That's exactly right, officer. He's a careful driver. If this man hadn't built such a hazardous fence, none of this would have happened." But the younger officer was crouched by the skid marks again, measuring with her boot. She called out, "These are at least 50 feet long. On dry pavement, that's consistent with braking at around 40 miles an hour. Minimum." The crowd of neighbors murmured. Someone even whistled low. Derek's face went pale. Karen froze, her eyes darting like she was calculating her next excuse. The older officer scribbled something in his notepad. "Mr. Miller, your story doesn't match the evidence. And on top of that, your registration is expired, your inspection sticker is overdue, and your tires are nearly bald. This vehicle isn't safe to operate." Karen exploded. "Safe to operate? It's perfectly fine. That car is practically new." I barked out a laugh. "New? That thing rattles louder than a shopping cart." A ripple of chuckles ran through the neighbors again, and Karen's cheeks flushed crimson. The officer ignored the side commentary. He continued, steady and calm. I understand you're upset, but we have to go by facts, not feelings. The vehicle isn't compliant, the driver was speeding, and the crash was entirely preventable. Responsibility lies here, not with the property owner." Karen looked like she might actually faint from rage. She grabbed Derek's arm, squeezing it so hard he winced. "Don't you dare admit to anything," she hissed. "We'll fight this. We'll sue if we have to. But the younger officer caught it. Her eyes narrowed, and she said, Instructing your son to withhold information isn't helping him. Right now, we're looking at multiple violations. If you'd like, we can proceed formally and let the court decide. But the more cooperative you are, the better this goes." Derek's bravado cracked. For the first time all afternoon, he looked less like a cocky kid and more like a scared boy caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "Mom," he muttered, "maybe we should just..." Karen snapped her fingers. "No. Don't you dare back down. They're twisting this. It's his word against ours." She jabbed her finger toward me. "This neighbor has had it out for us since day one. He's the liar." I raised both hands, my voice calm but firm. "Karen, every single person here heard your son's engine screaming before the crash. Ask any of them." The crowd stirred. Mrs. Dalton, the elderly lady from across the street, stepped forward. She was small, maybe 5 feet tall, but her voice carried like a bell. "I was watering my roses when it happened. That boy was flying down the street like a bat out of hell. Nearly scared me to death." Another neighbor chimed in, a dad with his toddler on his hip. "Yeah, I've seen him doing it before too. He doesn't slow down. He's gonna kill somebody one of these days." The officers turned toward the crowd, listening. It was like a wall of testimony crashing down on Karen and Derek. For once, I wasn't the only voice standing against them. Karen's eyes went wide, darting from face to face, realizing the tide had turned. She tried to rally. "They're all lying. Every single one of you. This is harassment, a conspiracy." The older officer cut her off, his voice firm. That's enough. One more outburst like that, and you'll be removed from the scene." The silence that followed was thick. Karen pressed her lips together so tightly they nearly disappeared. Then the officer turned back to Derek. "Son, here's what's going to happen. We're filing an incident report citing you for excessive speed and unsafe vehicle operation. Due to the expired inspection and unsafe condition of your car, it's going to be towed from the scene." Derek's eyes widened in panic. "What? No, come on. Just let me drive it home. It still runs." He slapped the hood, which groaned like an old washing machine. Karen shrieked. "You can't do that. That's illegal. You can't take his car, it's his property." The officer's tone was cool as ice. We can and we will. An unsafe vehicle cannot be driven on public roads. End of discussion." The younger officer radioed for a tow truck, jotting down details. The sound of her calm, professional voice reporting the situation was like music to my ears. Karen's face turned a dangerous shade of purple. She looked ready to explode into tears, rage, or both. She clutched Derek's arm and hissed at him. "Don't you dare let them take it. Do something. Say something." But Derek just stood there, pale, shaking his head. He knew the game was over. The crowd of neighbors, who had been watching silently, started murmuring again. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others smirked. One guy even muttered, "About time." For the first time in months, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. Justice wasn't just possible, it was happening right in front of me. Karen, though, wasn't finished. Not yet. Because if there was one thing I knew about her, it was that she'd go down swinging, even if she was already sinking. The distant rumble of the tow truck grew louder, and as it turned onto our street, I swear it felt like a cavalry charge. The massive flatbed rolled to a stop beside Derek's mangled sports car, its engine humming steady and strong. To me, it sounded like victory. Karen, on the other hand, looked like she'd swallowed poison. Her face twisted, and her hands flew into the air. No. Absolutely not. You are not taking my son's car. This is theft. This is corruption. The tow truck driver hopped down from the cab, unfazed by her theatrics. He was a burly man in grease-stained coveralls, with arms like tree trunks and a clipboard in hand. He gave the officers a quick nod. Which one's getting hauled? The older officer pointed at Derek's car. That one. Expired inspection, unsafe condition, involved in a collision. The driver scratched his chin, then grinned. Looks like it's already halfway junkyard ready. A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd of neighbors. Even the younger officer cracked the faintest smile before regaining her composure. Karen gasped like she'd been slapped. How dare you, she screeched. You can't insult my son's car like that. It's practically a collector's item. I raised an eyebrow. Collector's item? Sure. If the collection is for worst decisions in automotive history. That got another round of chuckles, and Karen whipped her head toward me, eyes blazing with pure hatred. This isn't over. You'll pay for this. Everyone will see what kind of neighbor you really are. But her threats bounced off me like raindrops. For the first time, I didn't feel the sting of her words. I wasn't the one under scrutiny anymore, she was. And everyone knew it. The tow truck driver knelt down, hooking heavy chains under the front of Derek's car. Metal clinked and rattled, the sound echoing across the street like a countdown to Karen's meltdown. Derek, pale and fidgeting, finally broke his silence. Mom, just stop. Please. You're making it worse. Karen whipped toward him, eyes wide. Worse? Worse? They are stealing your car, Derek. They are treating you like a criminal. The older officer stepped forward, his tone calm but firm. No one is stealing anything. This vehicle is being impounded for safety violations. Your son will have the opportunity to address those issues, but until then, it is not legally allowed on the road. Karen stomped her foot like a toddler. This is harassment. We'll sue. We'll have your badges. The younger officer sighed, clearly done with the nonsense. Unless you'd like to be charged with obstruction, I suggest you stand back and let us do our job. That shut her up, at least for a moment. She glared at the officers, then at me, then at the neighbors, as though daring someone to side with her. But no one did. The street had gone quiet again, except for the metallic groan of Derek's car being winched up onto the flatbed. As the car tilted backward, fluid dripped from the busted radiator, pooling on the asphalt. The once prized possession now looked pitiful, sagging like a wounded animal. Derek buried his face in his hands, muttering curses under his breath. Finally, the car settled onto the truck bed with a heavy thunk. The driver secured the chains, dusted off his hands, and gave a casual thumbs up to the officers. All set. I'll take it to the yard. Karen made one last desperate lunge toward the truck, but the older officer stepped in front of her. Enough. She froze, chest heaving, her anger boiling so hot she could barely speak. But deep down, she knew it was over. The tow truck roared to life, rolling slowly down the street, Derek's car trailing away in chains. The sight was glorious, like watching justice being dragged off into the sunset. The neighbors clapped. I'm not exaggerating, they actually clapped. Mrs. Dalton even let out a cheer. Karen spun around, her voice hoarse with rage. You think this is funny? You'll all regret this. Every last one of you. But her threats fell flat. She wasn't the queen of the block anymore. She was the spectacle, the villain in a story where everyone else had chosen their side. The officers finished their report, handing Derek a slip of paper. The younger officer spoke gently, almost kindly, despite the chaos. "Mr. Miller, you'll need to appear in court for the citations. You'll also be responsible for impound fees. We suggest you take this as an opportunity to address your vehicle's condition." Derek nodded weakly, his earlier arrogance completely drained away. He looked smaller somehow, diminished in front of everyone. Karen tried to rally again, but her voice cracked. "This isn't justice. This is persecution. My son is the victim here." The older officer turned to her one last time, his words like steel. The only victim today is that fence. And it belonged to your neighbor." That was the knockout punch. Even I couldn't have said it better. When the officers finally left, the neighbors lingered, buzzing with satisfaction. A few came over, patting me on the back, offering to help repair the fence. Mrs. Dalton smiled warmly. "You handled that well. She's been terrorizing this street for years. About time someone stood up to her." I thanked them, feeling lighter than I had in months. The fence could be rebuilt. The boards could be replaced. But what couldn't be repaired, at least not easily, was Karen's reputation. From that day forward, the dynamic of the neighborhood shifted. People stopped letting her intimidate them. She still strutted around, barking about HOA rules, but nobody took her seriously anymore. Her word had lost its power. And every time I walked past that stretch of road where the skid marks faded into my yard, I smiled. Because I remembered the day the truth won out. The day her son's reckless driving and her lies finally caught up with them. The day justice rolled away on the back of a tow truck.